Is Brock Pierce. And Brock, you have disrupted so many different environments. Let's go to just the video game industry. How many years back should we go? 2005?
No, I mean, that story would start probably in 1999.
99?
Yeah.
How did you disrupt the video game industry in 1999?
Well, I grew up playing games my whole life, like hardcore pro gamer before they really tracked that type of stuff. And I also played as part of that all the card games like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. I didn't play Pokemon, but to use that as an example.
You're still playing it.
Well, the best character is Brock.
All right.
You can look that up. They made a game called Sanctum, or made by Digital Addiction, which was a chess meets Magic the Gathering type game, and like trading baseball cards, because I traded everything as a kid. I started running all the single trading, and I contacted the game company, and I'm like, hey, I'd like to do, you sell cards to shops like at comic book stores. I'd like to buy your virtual packets of cards in bulk and run the single store. Mm-hmm. They're like, that makes sense. And so I started doing that in '99, then post the internet collapse.
Which you were part of.
Yeah. I ended up very actively in things like Ultima Online, EverQuest, what eventually became things like World of Warcraft or Second Life, but then started making the market for all the digital economies in those games, which then led to building...
Well, make sure people understand that. You made the economies inside the games.
Yeah, so if you played a game, you'd be on a game server and you'd be a character that's progressing through levels non-linearly. You're accumulating swords, shields, whatever it might
Weapons,
be, space
powers, right.
gold, whatever. And these things take a lot of time. And so there were people that would want to buy those things from you to save themselves sometimes. Just like if you were a golfer, you'd buy a nice golf club,
right.
Whatever you're into. And if you're into playing online games, that's what you value. Just because something was intangible didn't make it any less valuable. It was, did it provide utility? Did it improve your social status? What were those things that mattered? And so seeing that market was emerging, I helped pioneer the secondary market for these online games. So
you had people play the game in another country that would achieve a certain level or power, and then you would sell it inside the game. It's easy as that, right?
Yeah.
At one point in time, how many people were working for you in that realm?
Well, the supply chain got to about 400,000 people in China.
400,000.
So that would have been in my early 20s, yeah.
In your early 20s. And from that, you started to realize that playing games was big, but people watching games, actually watching people play games, there was a whole industry around that. So you ended up launching TV networks in places like Korea.
China, yeah.
Watching people play games.
It was a big deal. That's where the esports industry started in Asia. And I was running the first conferences in China for 5,000 people event stadiums. This is back in like 2005 and 2006. And sponsored Sky, who was the first Chinese gamer in the world to win the World Cyber Games. So helped bring in the first Olympian.
This is pretty good coming from a childhood actor, who basically was known for being in a couple of movies. That positioned you pretty well, being, of course, Mighty Ducks, first kid. Did you ever think you would see yourself on this side of the world now, being actually one of the most well-recognized individuals in the crypto industry?
Well, I mean, I didn't choose to be an actor.
You didn't choose?
I didn't choose to be a performer. It found me, and I ended up as a performer in the earlier parts of my life. And I decided I didn't like being famous from the acting stuff. And in the world I'd grown up in, the job that looked most interesting to me was to be the producer, the person pulling all the pieces together. And so I started dabbling in independent film production before I got into internet entrepreneurship. But that's where I was like, I'm leaving kind of my artist side of myself kind of behind, and now I've just kind of fully integrated that into my business world.
Oh, I would say you're definitely a performer right now. So back in 2011 to 12-ish, you and I were doing a panel at the Milken Conference, and we were talking about the whole idea of perks and points and different types of credits, frequent flyer miles, but also different points. And cryptocurrency was just becoming a conversation, specifically Bitcoin. We knew that companies like Second Life had their own type of currency that was being utilized and played. Never really took off. But you saw something like Bitcoin becoming the big player. You firmly believed in it right when it came out.
Well,
and people laughed at you, by the way.
Not when it first came out. I
2012.
Which is a few years later. My early impression was that this or something like it was the future. and tracked it, but I've learned to think about market timing, and when is the right time to attempt things.
You bought in the early days when Bitcoin was what? What was at its lowest?
I don't remember.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, of course you do.
Well, you couldn't really buy Bitcoin in the early days. So one of the ways that you can normally tell if someone is full of it is when they talk about how they bought Bitcoin early on. There were not people really buying Bitcoin in 2010 or 2011. Even in 2013, it was extremely difficult to buy Bitcoin. It was easier to buy mining equipment and mine for coins.
Unless you were with Red Social Circle, and you would exchange between one another.
Yeah,
okay?
there's not a lot of those channels, but I'm saying there's very little of that stuff. 2012, I mean, until there was Mt. Gox, unless you were Hal Finney or one of these, there wasn't much trading until the pizzas. So everybody got their start generally in mining, if you were early. And that's just a good way to really tell if someone's dates are right.
Unless, again, they knew people and
No,
friends.
there are, in 2011 and 12, you could start to buy.
And that's when, fortunately...
But hard.
It was hard.
And not at any volume. If you wanted to buy $1 million worth of crypto in 2012, you couldn't.
You couldn't do that, no. Yeah, you were fortunate to do 20 or 30,000. That was on the high
Yeah,
end.
that would be a big trade.
Yeah, it's a huge trade. So now where we're at today is it looks legitimate. It's real. Cryptocurrency is real. We're seeing not just traders like you, but governments getting involved. Venezuela, we're seeing other places saying, hey, let's get into this. You are so ahead of the game. You're saying that it goes beyond what we see. What's the future of crypto look like? The future. Don't look at today. Give us 5 years in the future.
Well, first of all, let's change the term from crypto
to
call it the new internet.
The new internet.
Or call it the blockchain.
Can we call it blockchain?
If you like. it's
you like that? I know you do. Let's call it the new internet.
There's a longer story there, not for today. But if you think about the internet and its origins, in the 1970s and 80s, as this technology was first being pioneered, the cryptography necessary at the time to secure the internet was known. But we didn't have the computer processing capabilities at the time to implement the security protocols into the internet. So as TCP and IP and the protocols are all being built up and things are being stacked and things are happening, when we got to the point that we had the processing power to secure the internet, it was already too much had been built.
Right.
And so the foundation of the internet is broken. It's insecure and it's not fixable. It's too many Band-Aids. What the blockchain is doing is, so if you think of the internet, the information highway as a data transport protocol, but think of it as an insecure data transport protocol. What the blockchain is doing is turning it into a secure data transport protocol, which is the new internet. It's basically a huge upgrade to the whole thing. Everybody that exists today is probably going to have to rebuild their business on this new data structure.
So 5 years from now, what's it look like?
Everything probably out there today is gone and rebuilt as something better.
And the idea of when someone doesn't really know this, which the traditional media still doesn't understand it, they still associate Silk Road to blockchain or Bitcoin, and they say it's still used for nefarious purposes. How do you get the media to understand what's going on so it could inform the population, the public, that this is actually the right direction to go?
Well, I mean, the media, the main media outlets, that doesn't fit into their narrative.
Why doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it's.
They want to show its use for.
I don't want to get into like fake news and things of that nature, but you have. Let's talk about the better aspect of it, because journalists play an important role in society. But what's happened is journalists that are out there trying to perform these important functions to seek the truth and share that information so the people that need it have it, and people are aware of issues and all the wonderful things that journalism causes. The problem is most of those journalists work for large media companies. And when you work within a large media company, you have editors and you have all sorts of biases and interests that are starting to call it different agendas, where you're not really getting the truth.
Got it.
You're getting, his story, history. You're getting a version of the truth that someone or somebody's wants to tell. And then we as consumers are another aspect of it. That is that negative news tends to resonate better with people for whatever reason. Change that in your life if you're letting that, and start by changing your sources of media to things that actually uplift you. It's not a healthy thing to engage constantly in the negativity. But you've got then the internet's disrupted these media enterprises, so their revenues have been dropping, their business models are changing, they're struggling. It's now about speed first to release. It's not about quality. It's just the industry is under fire and under siege. So when that happens, though, this is what you get. You get, and fortunately, I think most people recognize at this point that the media is a source. It's one version of the truth.
Right.
It's one person's view, and that if you actually want to know the truth, you have to unfortunately take the time to
research,
get multiple opinions, get
right.
multiple perspectives, and then from there, hopefully, your intuition will allow you to triangulate something that's closer to the truth.
So I've known you for almost 18 years. Okay.
Long time.
Long time, and I've seen you go through all these different iterations. And through this process, one thing that I've seen you do is you are about transparency, meaning your homes are opened up where people can walk in and out. You really don't want to hide things. And that's one of the reasons why you actually love the idea of this new internet. It's open, it's transparent, right? I need you to be transparent with me on something. Why Puerto Rico? Why are you moving everything to an island that was devastated by this Cat 5 hurricane?
Well, I've reached a point in my life where I essentially live a life in service. Mm-hmm. And you look at the world with that sort of philanthropic lens, and you say, well, I learned the game of compounding interest, so I'm playing a different game now called compounding impact, in short. Instead of saying philanthropy, let's use a better term. Compounding impact is my focus. And not storing energy for self-interest.
So you're getting much more out than what you put in.
Well, it's giving. I care more about what I give than what I get.
Got it.
That's what matters to me if you want to start to understand how I look at the world.
In Puerto Rico?
So you look at the world and you say, who needs help right now? And there's a lot of people in the world that need help right now. And so then you have to spend time going, where do I prioritize? And, Puerto Rico is interesting in terms of its origins. Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic in 1492, first hitting the Bahamas, but then hits Puerto Rico and sets up shop, basically the epicenter of the New World, which had been around for 20,000 years, was Puerto Rico. And so when you think about the impact of the Americas and you start thinking through all of the history of those 500 years, Puerto Rico has pretty much consistently drawn the short end of the stick. And then, as they're in, what looks a bit like a death spiral economically, jobs, all sorts of problems, and many reasons, too long to get into all of them right now. But you look at that and when you think it can't get any worse, then they get hit by a devastating hurricane. Mm-hmm. And it's just, they need help. They've gone from 3.5 million people to like 2.7 right now. They've been undergoing the most incredible brain drain of intellectual, human, and financial capital. How do you fix it?
You can make a difference. That's why you're there.
Yes, and it's also interesting because most people don't know Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Puerto Rico is part of the United States. They're U.S. citizens. You have a passport, but most people call it Puerto Costa and confuse it with Costa Rica. Puerto Rico is a beautiful, wonderful place that has incredible people and all the potential, but what Puerto Rico has is a PR problem. It needs to be put back on the map.
And you're doing that.
Yes.
Okay, one more thing, or actually two more things before we go. You got to be transparent with me, okay?
I'm always transparent. I live in a glass house.
The hat.
Oh, the hat is a wonderful hat maker by the name of Nick Fouquet. Uh-huh. And so he makes wonderful hats. I fell in love with a piece of his a while ago, and then I looked at it and I'm like, I don't need to waste this kind of money
and
on
the
things.
Cards?
Well, the cards are, you've got $100 bills there.
Uh-huh. All right.
Much like you have a 50-cent coin here, but it becomes a Spanish penny. And then if the 50-cent coin is there.
They can't see that. They can't see
and then,
the magic
But hold on, where'd it go?
All right.
Oh, there it is. It's in the hat.
It's in the hat. Brock Pierce.
I was a professional magician as a kid
I know
as well,
you were.
and so
Last
I
thing,
like this money metaphor.
2014, you said, hey, I want to be the first trillionaire in the world. You did say that to me, and I remember that clearly. How's it going?
Well, so I don't know if you've been following my definition. So a billionaire to me is not someone with $1 billion. A billionaire to me is someone that's positively impacted the lives of 1 billion people. A unicorn to me is, a community that's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. The trillionaire comment is probably taking it too far, but that's the idea of going beyond humans, and the idea that we can positively impact, 1 trillion living things. It's where you go beyond just thinking of yourselves. It's things like the Amazon, when you start thinking of, the Earth holistically. But let's start with changing 1 billion lives. That's a longer term, call it crazy aspirational goal.
You're getting there.
That's called not the moon shot, but the Mars shot.
It's a universe shot.
The universe shot.
Brock is hanging out with us. Brock owns a ton of different companies. I don't even want to touch them because there are so many of them, but you want to do a quick search on him because he is one of these guys that's changing the planet. Brock, I appreciate hanging out with us.
Ken, always great to see you.
Voice of Disruption. We're always here to help you disrupt yourself. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us and being part of the Voice of Disruption.
Yeah.
When are you back?